Okay, so I want to end this episode with a little bit of my kind of polemic about the liberal democracy. In my notes, the heading is "The liberal democracy is lame." This is the heading for the last section here. And I really want to emphasize this because I think it's lame in this sense. So let's pretend that the liberal democracy worked and that it was working now. And then it really did result in a society where it gives people everything that they want. It gives them total freedom, total economic prosperity, peace, security, stability. Because if we're going to hate on something, let's hate on it in its best form. Let's pretend the liberal democracy actually works and it gives you everything it promises. I think it's still lame. I think you still condemn it if you're an Orthodox Christian or if you're really any seriously committed religious person or any person who just doesn't believe in materialism. Because a life totally dedicated to personal satisfaction, to pleasure, to survival, this is not much higher than the life of a domestic ape. And this is what I was hinting at earlier. It's not enough to have a life of meaning that you have material prosperity. I mean, you know this already, right? You can be rich and miserable. I know so many people who over the course of my life, who are mega rich and they're miserable and their families are a mess. And it's not because they're rich. It's because of something else. And I know so many poor people who don't have much, and they're so happy. And of course, I know rich people who are well-adjusted and happy. I know poor people who are miserable and awful. And it's like, okay, so the human condition meaning in your life is not really correlated directly to how much riches you have and how much peace and prosperity and security you have. Because the good life is a life of meaning, not merely a life of pleasure. So again, what about glory? What about striving for greatness? What about a great task and destiny that a people together can unite under? So it's like all these modern political conversations, like, oh, well, you should follow this political philosophy because it's going to appeal to you as some kind of, it's going to have this individual appeal. It's going to be satisfying to you as an individual if you adopt this political perspective, or this vision for society, and it's going to gratify you. This is not how ancient people talked. When ancient people went around trying to be a people, to found nations, they didn't make all these appeals to individual satisfaction. They made appeals to the highest moral reality they could conceive of. When Moses made the Hebrews, he brought down divine law from heaven, awesome shows of magic and glory and power. When Romulus made Rome, like these people, they founded nations on what? On connections to the gods, to God, to the God of gods. And they dazzled people with ecstatic visions of higher life, a life lived that was more than just eating and sex and pleasure and satisfaction, that was dedicated to some higher purpose, that was bigger than any of the individuals, in which all of these people could unite together in some great task, so as a people, some great destiny. And these great people groups from history, they had these visions, and that's why we remember Rome and Athens and the ancient Israelites and all of these people groups, the Egyptians. It's just, and what did they do? They built glorious things, and they dedicated them to the gods or to the God of gods. And that's a high and beautiful vision. That's something that people can unite together as a group and make something great. And it's not at all clear to me that we have a great task like that as a people. Like, is the great task of the liberal democracy just to maximize pleasure for everyone? Compared to the founding of Rome, that's really lame. It's kind of pathetic, actually. And so I'm using these pagan examples, But what's the great task and destiny of the Christian race? It's to become, this Christian race is how the fathers talk about it, right? We transcend these geographic boundaries and become one in Christ. It's to become not the lords and possessors of nature, but the priest of creation, to have communion with the Holy Trinity, to be filled with God. God became man so that man could become God. That's our destiny, to become God, to be united to an ecstatic vision of love and truth and glory and beauty. That's the highest. I mean, name me another religion that has the same level of regard for what man's highest destiny is. I let me know. I don't think there is than the classic Christian conception of the destiny of man. All of this is to say, I think this is, where the liberal democracy isn't doing us any favors. I know lots of Christian identifying folks, and especially Americans, they have this utopian idea for, freedom and government, and we need to do it this way, and the Constitution and all this kind of stuff. None of that is going to achieve theosis. And, America is going to pass away. There's nothing really special about it from a Christian perspective. To the contrary. And, if Rome and her glory passed away, then so will the United States. And that's why, ultimately, I think that liberalism is really something like secular heaven. In the same way that ideology is this sort of lowering of religion to the level of worldliness, I think the liberal democracy, in being a post-Christian idea, drawing on the goal of Christianity, this paradisical vision of the eighth day in the kingdom of heaven, and then saying, instead of all that theology, we're going to make heaven on earth. And that vision of heaven on earth is material prosperity, pleasure, and no pain. And then we project that idea onto the Christian concept of heaven, which, if you've read my book, that's not at all the Christian conception of heaven as the church conceives of it. And so, secular heaven is lame. Anyway, enough of this.